taking a while, but I'm glad I have been given that opportunity to also add my contribution to the State of the Nation's address. Mr. Speaker, honestly, we're expecting the President to use the SONA to set the tone for his administration's governance. But what did we see? What did we see, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker? We rather saw a predictable mixture of economic doomsaying, political blame shifting, and populist promises that is unsustainable, looking at where he claims we are now. Mr. Speaker, in addition to painting that gloomy picture, Mr. Speaker, in addition to painting that gloomy picture he says he inherited.
Please, honorable members, please.
Mr. Speaker, in addition to painting that gloomy picture he says he inherited, the President has outlined very heavy expansionary fiscal policies. And I doubt if in any way this is not a populist agenda. I doubt if this is sustainable. Mr. Speaker, on one hand, the President says the economy is in an ICU state. But on the other hand, he's pushed far-reaching social intervention measures with no clear funding plan. Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members, please.
Mr. Speaker, clearly, we in the MPP never shied away from the challenges in the economy. We were honest about it. And that is why we came up with the PCPEG program, the post-COVID-19 program for economic growth. That is what we came up with. We did not lament. We did not throw our hands in the air.
Why you do that? We'll disturb you people.
We acknowledged the challenges and came up with this program, which we sent to the IMF to assist us in the bailouts. So we did not go to the IMF empty-handed, but we went with our plan. And 2 years down the line, Mr. Speaker, you see, everybody can tell that truly the plan yielded some results. Let me start with the financial sector, Mr. Speaker. For us, the data is clear. We left a much stronger financial sector than what we inherited in 2016. Mr. Speaker, this is why I say so. In 2015, an asset quality review report was done with the IMF, stating the strengths and weaknesses of the banks. And in that report, we saw that some of the banks were bleeding. President Mahama at that time failed to do the needful. He failed to stop the bleeding. In 2016, he failed to stop the bleeding. It took a strong and decisive leader in the person of Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo to do the needful. To forestall the total collapse of the financial sector. And Mr. Speaker, as a result of this, 1, we were able to save 4.6 million depositors' money. 2, the total banking assets, which we inherited in 2016, was around 81.2 billion Ghana cedis. By October 2024, the total banking assets, which we had, was 367.5 billion Ghana cedis. And this was in October 2024. Mr. Speaker, we also saw the private sector credit increase by 28.8%. And clearly, we have also seen improved ratios in the banks. And this is data coming from Bank of Ghana for January 2025. This is data coming from Bank of Ghana for January 2025. Mr. Speaker, I'm beginning to suspect that with the criticism that the President is giving in the financial sector, maybe he wants to use that as an excuse to recklessly give out banking licenses again for us to witness what we saw in the DKM saga. We haven't forgotten about that. let us remember, we needed a bold and decisive leader to stem the tide in the financial sector. And it was the MPP government led by President Akufo-Addo who did that and saved so much. And here we are with the results today. Data does not lie. Mr. Speaker, still on the economy, we were here when the president told us that we have a scanty reserves for debt servicing. And speaker after speaker on the other side mentioned that as well. But Mr. Speaker, what he failed to say was that across the globe, there were resource challenges as a result of COVID-19 and as a result of COVID-19 and the Russian-Ukraine war. Mr. Speaker, I was expecting this from them. Mr. Speaker, I was expecting this from them. It's the same with President Mahama. When he goes out there, outside this country, he acknowledges the effect of COVID-19 and Russian-Ukraine war. But as soon as President Mahama gets back to Ghana, he closes that memory. He closes that and never mentions the fact that COVID-19 happened, and as well as the Russian-Ukraine war. So clearly, we left. Mr. Speaker, let us take note that this same scanty resources is what we have left in the form of gross international reserves of 8.9 billion Ghana cedis. And this is what they are currently using to shore up the Ghana cedi against its trading currencies. Mr. Speaker, currently the cedi is relatively stable. Mr. Speaker, we also left in, not necessarily in the sinking fund, but we left huge sums of money such that they were able to pay the 6 billion Ghana cedis coupon due. Mr. Speaker, we left enough money to enable them pay the 6 billion coupon, which was due just 2 weeks ago. So, Mr. Speaker, you don't have to keep money only in the sinking fund. You have several accounts which you can keep money. This is innovative ways of raising money and keeping money. And that is exactly what we did. Mr. Speaker, like I said, we left a huge sums of money in the account. And that is why they were able to pay the 6 billion. We all know how President Mahama was very happy when they were able to pay the 6 billion. This is money that they did not work for. This is money that we ring-fenced and saved to enable our incoming government to also be able to fulfill its obligations. That is what we do. There is continuity in government. And so we think ahead and we make sure we make such provisions. Listen. Let me also put it on record that yes, it is true that in 2016, when NDC was leaving, they left $250 million in the sinking fund. But you have forgotten that when you left $250 million in the sinking fund, that year alone, the debt servicing due for us to pay when we inherited the reins of government was $1 billion. $1 billion. $1 billion. $1 billion. Take out $250 million from $1 billion. What do you get? Ask us how we paid it. We did not go around complaining about it, but we did the needful because we had a decisive leader who was responsible and competent. Mr. Speaker, let me also put on record. Mr. Speaker, let me also put on record that it is evident for everybody to see that an economy that grew by an average of 6.3% from Q1 of 2024 to Q3 of 2024 cannot be said to be an economy in ICU state. An economy that had 3.4% growth in 2016 was never called a mismanaged economy. An economy that had 3.4% growth in 2016 was not called a criminally mismanaged economy. How should we call a 6.3% economic growth rate? It is not just okay to be throwing out words. It is not just okay to be throwing out words. If you have the data, let the data speak for you. Mr. Speaker, we also made sure that as at November, we had a primary balance of 0.4%. In 2016, what did we see? A negative primary balance. Mr. Speaker, against all these things, against all, the negative impressions the president created about the economy, we were able to exceed our domestic revenue collections. In 2024, we were able to exceed our domestic revenue collections. So how do you call such an economy? So clearly, on the State of the Nation's address, Mr. President will have to come again because he gave very inaccurate figures and facts. Mr. Speaker, but we all acknowledge that we are not out of the woods yet. We began with the domestic debt exchange. We had about 99% participation. We have also done the external debt exchange. We have 93% participation. We were able to save about $8.1 billion US. And I'm asking my friends on the other side, what is left of the external is just 7%. This is not too hard. Complete it and let's finish this. It's just 7% left. We have done the 93% of the work. Go ahead and finish it with just the 7%. I doubt if you'll be able to do it. Mr. Speaker, let me also come to the populist expansionary policy. I heard His Excellency say that he is coming up with the Agri for Economic Transformation agenda. He's coming up with the Feed Ghana program agenda, the Poultry Farm to Table in KON Kitinkiti program, the 1 million coders program, and finally, the Ghana Medical Trust Fund, Mahama Care. But let me ask ourselves, which president will name an initiative after himself or herself? Which president? Which president? Except President Mahama. Except President Mahama. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
Why did you name it here? People take attention.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm asking myself, which president will name in Ghana, will name an initiative after himself or herself, except President Mahama?
The last time branded bus after
Mr. Speaker, I must say that these are real expansionary policies. These are real expansionary policies. And I'm asking myself, President Mahama says he's going to cut expenditure. So on one side, you are cutting expenditure. On the other side, you are bringing huge expansionary policies. Where are you going to get the funding from? Let's be realistic. Let's be realistic. Let's be realistic about this. And let's make sure that, one, Mr. Speaker, what we in the minority are demanding of the president is that we want him to be responsible and competent and focus on, one, sustaining and improving the growing confidence in the economy as a result of the turn of things. We want the president to sustain the growing confidence in the economy and not commit to large-scale expansionary projects. Two, we also want the president to ensure fiscal discipline and efficient use of resources. That is what we expect from the president. Mr. Speaker, we also want the president, one thing on my heart, is for the president to strengthen the private sector.
At least she still have 1 more minute, so please.
For the president to strengthen
listen to her.
To strengthen the private sector, to enable the private sector create the jobs and not government be creating temporary jobs that will not last and at the end of the day will disappoint a lot of people. So, Mr. Speaker, in keeping with the national dialogue, I'm very, very happy of what happened yesterday. Yesterday, Mr. Ishmael Yamson said one thing, very, very profound. He said, I read on Joy FM that he said that, listen, nobody can transform this nation as President Mahama himself. Because in places where there's been transformation, it takes just one single leader to do that. It takes just one single leader.
Honorable members, please. Some of you have difficulty in catching my eye. For sure. Because if what you do is just to make noise and shout across, there is no way that you can get opportunity to contribute. Because you've done it by shouting. And then you complain that your constituents don't hear you. But they see you. The cameras are capturing you. And they are looking at you, shouting. Please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm rounding up. What I said was yesterday, I saw on my Joy Online what Mr. Ishmael Yamson said, one of the participants at the National Dialogue, Economic Dialogue. He said that in places where transformation has gone or taken place, it takes just the leader to do that. So we are expecting His Excellency, the President, to take the bull by the horn and hit the ground running and implement the policies in his manifesto. And I want to assure him that we on the minority side are ready to criticize constructively and also assist him to make sure he runs this economy and makes decisions that will inure to the benefit of all of us.
And the debate before this House. I want to start off by reading a portion of the State of the Nation address and asking my colleagues in the House whether they heard the President say this and whether they believe that this is the true state of the nation. Mr. Speaker, we inherited an economy that was running a high deficit with increasingly high inflation and interest rates. It was also characterized by rapidly depreciating currency. This unstable macro environment created an unfavorable investment environment for both indigenous and foreign capital. That's why we've called the National Economic Forum as an attempt to forge a consensus for a homegrown fiscal consolidation program. Did you hear the President say this? And is this the true state of the economy? You see, this was not in the State of the Nation address. You have just exposed yourselves. It was not in the State of the Nation address. This was not in the State of the Nation address. This was President John Dramani Mahama in 2013. This was President John Dramani Mahama in 2013, lamenting about the economy he inherited from the former president. You know that former president, Professor John Evans Atamils. You can check Hansard. You can check Hansard. There's a similarity between what the president did in 2013 and what he did here in the Chamber of Parliament in 2025. You know what that similarity is? Lamentations. Mr. Speaker, there's a phenomenon where new heads of state spend a lot of time lambasting, berating, demonizing their predecessors, hoping that they will use it as a basis to galvanize a certain narrative about why they came to power. Why you came to power doesn't matter. You are in power today. Your job is to do what? Is to fix it. Mr. Speaker, when a president during the State of the Nation's address spends his time lamenting like he did in 2013 and like he did here last week Thursday, what he does is that he invites the remnants of the previous administration to also come and to do what? To defend our record. In between the two, the real issues that you campaigned on, the things that the millions of young people who were singing Kwen Kwen are waiting to hear you deliver on, they get lost in the cracks. And I want to spend some time reminding you of the things that you campaigned on and the things that many people were hoping that when the president mounted the podium, he will be explaining how he will be delivering on them. The president campaigned on the cost of living crisis. He campaigned that transport fares were high and were still going high, and that if he's given an opportunity to come to power, he will roll out a program to tackle it. Did anybody hear the president here explain how he was going to tackle the phenomenon of transport fares that are going up? He spent all the time lamenting and trying to blame the heads of state of the past, just like he did in 2013. The president campaigned on high electricity bills and the fact that if he has an opportunity to come to power, he will introduce measures to tackle it. when he mounted the podium on Thursday, the expectation was that he would lay out a program, which program we now in Parliament will spend time debating. Did anybody hear the President explain how he's going to tackle electricity tariffs that keep going up? For many months, when the President was campaigning, he was speaking about high food inflation. When he mounted the podium, I was hoping to hear him outline how his program to deal with high food prices. I didn't hear it. I don't know if colleagues heard the President outline it here so that we could be debating it by now. In fact, in the first 2 months of the President's administration, what he has started doing is to remove some of the pillars that helped hold some parts of the economy together. It's not true that everything that went on in the last 8 years was bad. It's not true that everything that went on was good. There were pluses, there were minuses. What we have to be doing now is building on the pluses. But already the President is dismantling the pluses. Take the gold for oil program, which was introduced as a measure to help bolster our currency. It was introduced to, among other things, help reduce the forex demand that was used in importing fuel for our country. Today, the President's new administration says it's dismantled that plus. We are waiting to hear, or we're hoping to hear in the State of the Nation address, what is replacing it, so that our currency will not soon tank. What we are seeing instead is a reduction or a drawdown of our gross international reserves to support the currency, and instead the gold for oil program has been dismantled. Mr. Speaker, the President traveled the length and breadth of this country talking about unemployment. In fact, he promised the young people of this country that for those who were afraid that if he wins power, he would terminate their appointments, they should fear not. He will keep them. And that for every one of those jobs, Ricketts, for every one of those jobs, he will recruit 2 more people. He says, shocking that when the President assumed office, the first thing he did was to terminate them. Thousands of young Ghanaians who have been properly recruited into the public services, terminated. And while the President mounted the podium, we did not hear him outline a program that he's going to use to create or to expand the job creation bracket. Mr. Speaker, another thing that we were hoping to hear the President talk about was the growth of the Ghanaian economy. Yesterday, I heard my brother Atoforsen talking about the fact that yes, there had been growth, but that growth, in his opinion, had not been able to tackle poverty. Growth between 2017 and 2020, when COVID hit, was an average of 7%. Undisputed. President Mahama campaigned on the fact that he's going to do better than 7%. When he mounted the podium, the whole country was expecting that he would outline a program that is going to grow the Ghanaian economy by more than 7%. Did anybody hear him speak about that one? The whole address was used for lamentation, blaming the previous administration and listing debts that he had inherited in various places. But if the President wanted to give a balanced account of what he had inherited, I would have imagined that he would have also spoken about the assets that he inherited. The President did not tell us that when he assumed office on the 7th of January, the gold reserves of this country were 30 tons. And that when he was leaving office the last time, it was 8 tons. That is over 22 tons increase in our gold reserve through Baumia's gold purchase program. The same Baumia that Adongo was bastardizing a few minutes ago. If the President wanted to give a balanced account, I was expecting that he would tell us that when he assumed office, he realized that the Ghanaian economy that he left, the economy which, by the way, during his tenure, shrunk by about $10 billion, when he came back, the economy has expanded by about $20 billion. The President did not tell us that. I was expecting that the President, when he mounted the podium, if he wanted to give a balanced account, would tell us that our gross international reserves, which he left at $6.5 billion when he was leaving power, when he came back, the morning of the 8th of January, when he reported to work, he found out that it was about $8.9 billion. This is a balanced account if he wanted to give a balanced account. But no, what he wanted to do was to lament, was to complain, was to blame the previous administration. Mr. Speaker, if indeed our colleagues on the government benches want a reset, the first reset we should be doing is moving away from the politics of the past, where new heads of state spend an inordinate amount of time lambasting, complaining, and blaming the past, and spend very little time putting their programs on the table so that we interrogate and support. When many of your colleagues appeared before the vetting committee and Osahen asked them, were you part of the manifesto committee? Have you seen these provisions that your manifesto has made on this subject? They said no.
Deputy Finance.
They said no, they haven't seen it. You would have imagined that by now, the programs for governance, you will be laying them here. And those who didn't see it at manifesto time will see it and even contribute their ideas. We've been in government before. Sometimes you can be here and you see a colleague lay a paper. You yourself, you don't even know the details. But you are part of the majority. You would imagine that by now, your economic transformation program, you will bring it here. Your 24-hour economic program, you will bring it here. These are the things that we were hoping the president will be giving details about, so that by now Parliament will be seized with them and will be interrogating them. Today, none of them has come before us. And we are spending all our time lambasting the past, trying to blame the past, complaining about the past. That's why Ghanaians voted for you. You have an opportunity to do what? To fix it. No, we don't need to wait for the budget. We need to have them here and now so that we can have an opportunity, you and us, to work on them. Mr. Speaker, I'll be concluding soon. 3 major things that I want to draw the government bench's attention to. Number 1, stop the propaganda. You have won the election already. You don't need to do more propaganda. The propaganda will not create jobs. It won't put food on the tables of people. It won't put clothes on the backs of people. Rather, bring your governance programs. Till date, we don't have a single definition for the 24-hour economy program. Everybody you talk to has a different definition. Program Bako, definition bebre. Program Bako, definition bebre. Spend time doing less propaganda and more time bringing your governance programs so that Parliament can assist you and work on it. Number 2, Mr. Speaker. Political parties, and this goes to all of us generally, while we do our manifestos and make promises, we should spend more time putting out the granular details of our programs so that in times like this, we'll spend less time doing the blame game of the past, blame game of the previous presidents, and more time interrogating the programs that you are going to govern with and assisting you not to even repeat the mistakes that we made. Mr. Speaker, I thank you for the opportunity to contribute to this.
Honorable members, it's now the turn of Honorable Ajayi Mensah.
Was in excess of 1 billion cedis as at 2024. Mr. Speaker, when you take just the minister and his deputy out, their salaries out, I don't think it will be less than 900 million cedis. Mr. Speaker, so where are the savings? It's populism. Let's begin to face it and give a better explanation to Ghanaians that we need more hands to save this country. We need more hands to execute government agenda. Mr. Speaker, as we speak, we have crocodile the John cats. We have crocodile the John cats. Today, you have directors in charge of agribusiness at the presidency. Today, you have them. Today, you have directors in charge of Black Star Experience. Today, you were criticizing Anado for having persons in charge of diaspora and experience at the Jubilee House. Today, you did not scrap it. You have them. That is crow the John cats. Mr. Speaker, in this era, where, for instance, The world is moving towards energy transition. Mr. Speaker, we need to be truthful to Ghanaians that at a place like the Energy Ministry, it is not enough to have a minister and a deputy minister. It is not enough. The world is aggressively pursuing an agenda to transform the use of energy from non-renewable energy to renewable energy. Mr. Speaker, and we have only one minister there seeing to power, seeing to oil and gas, and also seeing to the non-renewable, to the renewable energy. How do we compete with the West? How do we compete with the West? Mr. Speaker, it is very important that, Mr. Speaker, we begin to speak truth to the Ghanaian people by making sure that we explain to them why we make certain appointments, except that we must make sure it is quality. Mr. Speaker, the President omitted to explain to us why his Attorney General will file nolli prosequi without his prior approval. Why his Attorney General will file nolli prosequi without his approval. Mr. Speaker, the Attorney General in his press statement to explain the nolli prosequi stated that he did so without the President's prior approval. The President has heard it, but he could not explain to us. Is it the case that he's not in charge? Is it the case that he's not in charge? Is it the case that because of his style of giving directions, he has given a carte blanche direction to the Attorney General to do as he pleases? Mr. Speaker, we need explanation as to why. We need explanation as to why an Attorney General will turn himself into a prosecutor and a judge at the same time and withdraw a case to the extent that it will constitute a discharge and acquittal. An Attorney General, for the first time in the history of this country, unprecedented, became a judge and a prosecutor at the same time. Mr. Speaker, in that vein, what moral right does the Attorney General now have? What moral right to prosecute other acts of corruption? And Mr. Speaker, this is very important because, Mr. Speaker, historically, every challenge in government, any form of interruption that a government has experienced, one key fact, Mr. Speaker, or reason that has underpinned it has been corruption. Mr. Speaker, we should not be seen by Ghanaians as taking a partisan approach to the prosecution of corruption. The moment the Attorney General is seen to be withdrawing and filing nolli prosequi in respect of cases, very respectfully, involving his party members, the conclusion, Mr. Speaker, that any Ghanaian will likely come to is that he is being partisan. It's exactly what has happened. It is exactly what forced him to come and give a reason why he took that step, which is the first time any Attorney General has done that. Mr. Speaker, he is putting all of us at risk by that conduct. And so, Mr. Speaker, very respectfully, the President ought to have explained to us. The President ought to have explained to us how, in the face of that, his Attorney General was going to proceed to prosecute other matters. The President ought to have explained to us. Mr. Speaker, the President also stated that he was going to end the politicization in the judiciary. Mr. Speaker, when did the judiciary become politicized? Is it after the decision which Mr. President obtained at the Supreme Court in the year 2013, or after it? Mr. Speaker, the President ought to have explained to us why the judiciary was not partisan. At the time, for the first time in the history of this country, he appointed the General Secretary of a political party to the Supreme Court. At that time, it was not partisan. He was the first to have done that in the history of this country. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, it is important that the president comes clear on the way forward in terms of law and order. It is necessary for his economic agenda. Investors must have confidence that when they invest in this country, they will not be assailed by lawlessness. People will not come to their homes, their businesses, in the name of change of power to demand that they should be handed over to them, to demand that their legally obtained concessions should be given to them. Mr. Speaker, we need, very respectfully, going forward, to have this confidence. Mr. Speaker, the president also failed to mention before this House that even though in the NDC's manifesto, they have promised to set up new high courts in the newly created regions, the Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo government had already commenced with the construction of new high courts in all those regions. Mr. Speaker, and they were at various stages of completion. Mr. Speaker, the president ought to have acknowledged that. That way, Mr. Speaker, we would have had a true state of the nation. As it stands now, very respectfully, we were served, we were fed with a skewed state of the nation. Half truth.
One more minute.
Half truth, and so on and so forth. Mr. Speaker, I do really appreciate this treasured moment. I'm very grateful for the opportunity.
Honorable members,